Everybody, we are going to draw the original Santa Claus as conceived by the American artist Thomas Nast in the 1800s. This is where the modern image of Santa Claus kind of comes from. Should we do just the head, or do you want to try to do the? Okay, yeah, let's just do the head. So this is going to be our first three-quarter view head that we've ever done. So let's start by very lightly. It's going to be tricky, but okay. Let's start with a ball. There's different ways to conceptualize the head from this angle. I'm thinking of a ball, which isn't the cranium. This is called the Loomis method, where you just conceptualize a sphere, and then I'm going to think about the circumference of the sphere that follows the eye line and the brow line. So we're noticing that the eyes are kind of flowing. So very important to use light pressure at this stage of the drawing. And then near the bottom of the sphere, there's going to be the nose line. And we can't really see the chin and the jaw, but we can imagine it would be sort of like this. Now, in a classic three-quarter view like this, what you end up with often is the eye is more or less centered on the head, the leading eye. So what I'm saying is if we measure from here to here, it's going to be about the same as from here to here if this is the back of the cranium. Does everyone kind of agree with me there? So from here, so if this is the back of the cranium, that leading eye is going to be roughly in the middle. And that's, if you only measure one thing on a three-quarter view head, that's what you want to measure. You want to measure where the location of that eye. We're going to use some of our knowledge. So we've got the eye line is sort of going like this. And the brow line is up above it. So that's going to be maybe like this. And we're going to use our training of seeing angles. You see how that's about a 45-degree angle? So that's the angle of the nose. It's coming down at about 45 degrees at a point that's closer to this side than to this side. Now we're looking up at this head, so I'm going to conceptualize the bottom of the nose as sort of a plane that's slightly visible to me, like that. Before I do any details on the nose. And we can't see the mouth, obviously, but that would be about here, about a third of the way down. And the reason the eyes are so much above the center of the head is because the forehead is very foreshortened, right? We're looking up at it. So after I've done some basic measuring like this, what I usually like to do is I like to block in the rest of the shapes. So I'm going to block in his hat. And remember, blocking in means taking curves and translating them into straight lines. So I'm going to say this, sort of like here, and then down this way, and then down this way. Because we can see angles and distances a lot easier than we can see curves. So the hat ends up way behind the cranium back here. And I'm also going to block in the shape of the beard. So that's really simplified like this. And it cuts over to this right under the ear. So some teachers call this process crating. Most of you probably never heard that term in art before, but crating something is the process of of imagining or drawing, another word for it is the envelope. It's like this is the smallest form that I can fit this head into. And you want to look back and forth between your drawing and my drawing or the original and just ask yourself, is this overall shape similar to the shape that we're seeing in the original, which is this red shape here? And it's easiest if they're about the same size. So that's why I just zoomed in a little. And if you just stop thinking of it as Santa Claus or even as a head and think of it as the way you would the shape of a state, like if you were looking at a map of Arkansas or a map of some other state that you weren't very familiar with the shape, then you can begin to make corrections that are going to be very, very, very valuable. Most beginning drawings, the crate or the envelope is very, very different from the student work to the original, and it's a very easy mistake to avoid. So everyone feel okay about their envelope right now? The shape's looking similar? Okay, so I'm going to clean up my annotations, and once we're happy with the envelope and the main proportions, then we like to zoom in and really look at details. The details are a terrible place to start, but we're arrived at a time when it's appropriate. So we already found this slope, and we can notice that it's got a little bulge on the end, which is typical for noses, and comes around like that. The hardest thing about three-quarter views is that what used to be symmetrical in a front view is now not symmetrical at all. So this nostril here is just a little dot, it's barely there, but then we come around and this nostril is relatively huge because this nostril's facing us and this one is facing away from us. And then the olive form around this nostril is going to come up pretty high. And I'm just going to, I'll be right back. So that rule of asymmetry, which means lack of symmetry, it holds also with the eyes. This eye on the left is considerably smaller in our field of vision than the one on the right. And this is a lesson I give almost every time I do a three-quarter view, so I apologize if you've seen me do it before, those who are watching on YouTube, but so here's Santa's eyes. If we were looking at Santa from the front, they would be the same size. If we turn Santa sideways, aren't they still pretty much the same size? Like there's very little difference between them, right? But is this a correct way to think about what we're seeing? Anybody? Any ideas? Okay, this is not correct because from the front, faces are not flat. We think of them as flat, but from the front they are curved like this. So the eyes are symmetrical, but you got to understand both eyes are foreshortened. You see that? They're the same, but they're both foreshortened. If we now turn this just a little bit this way, you'll notice the eye on the left just got more foreshortened, and the eye on the right got less foreshortened. And that happened at the same instant. So what was completely symmetrical here just gets really asymmetrical, right? We go from no size difference to a really big size difference. The reason most people miss that is because they conceptualize faces as flat, and if they were flat, you wouldn't see that effect. But faces are horseshoe shaped. They curve around back, so that's why we get that effect. So if you were to measure this eye in our field of vision is much smaller than this eye. See that difference? Your brain doesn't want to acknowledge it, though, because your brain is like, no, the eyes are the same size. So what we're going to do is we're going to draw this eye over here, really short. Notice the lid is kind of a banana shape. We can't really see we see a little tiny twinkle in there, but not much of an iris. And notice that this lid actually disappears behind the bridge of the nose. One thing a lot of my students try to do when they see something like this is they just can't believe that's happening, and they'll draw the eye over here. They're going to leave a space between the corner of the eye and the bridge of the nose. There is no space. So if you just drew it with a space, I want you to correct your work and just snug that over right into that little pocket there. And then we're going to come up and around with the brow ridge and the eyebrow. The eyebrow is sort of following the outside of the socket of the skull that we've learned to draw. And then notice that this cheek, he's so jolly that his cheeks are very round and protruding out as much as his nose does, like that. Okay, the first step with the other eye is we already placed it. It sort of should be here. We're going to check our work and make sure the angle between the outside of the ala and the corner of the eye, see how that angle is roughly parallel to the angle of the nose. It's just a little steeper. So we've got our bridge of our nose going like this, and this angle is like this. That gets us to the corner of the eye here. And then we're going to draw this lid, another kind of banana shape. And we're going to draw, this time we can see that iris is dark under there. And we're going to see a little crinkly wrinkles around the eye, crow's feet. He's an elderly gentleman. And there's that other round cheek. But when I draw that for him, I'm going to relate it to the cheek on the left. Notice how, and everyone just stop drawing for a second, pay attention, because this is why I do not teach three-quarter views until I've taught perspective. You see these two red lines, what are they doing? Converging to the left, because this form is closer to us, this form is further away. And that all these forms, even the mouth, the top of the forehead, they're going to share a vanishing point. So it's really useless to try to do three-quarter view heads until you know basic perspective. So we're going to make those construction lines to make sure we are converging the right direction, our angles are good, and then we can draw that apple cheek under there. And on this apple cheek, you're going to recognize something else we learned this semester, which is how to shade spheres. See the shadow map on this apple cheek? You can even see a very slight reflected light along the bottom of it. And that's going to be very similar to things we've learned. That's why the most frustrating thing in the world is if you take an art class, and a lot of people do, I know I did, where they start teaching you how to do portraits before you've really mastered the art of perspective and of shading geometric solids, because all the skills build on each other, and you're just going to make a lot of mistakes if you don't know these things first. Now, does anyone have an idea? See how strong that reflected light is on the bottom of his nose? You're all looking at reflected lights on the bottom of your noses in your photographs. How come Santa's reflected light is so bright compared to yours? It doesn't really relate to his jolliness. Anyone else have an idea? I haven't heard the answer yet.
It's the reflected light.
What's it reflecting from?
Christmas lights from your house while you're sleeping. No, it's just a really strong light.
No, it's reflecting off his mustache. He's got a white mustache that sticks way out. So that's where it's reflecting from. It's always going to reflect from something that's nearby, not things that are far away. And that mustache, that's why that doesn't look wrong, because that white mustache is going to reflect a lot more light than a normal philtrum. Okay, so this is the center line between the sides of the mustache. Notice it comes down just a little bit to the right of the center of this curve. And then we're going to sort of block in the rest of the mustache here, and the rest of it coming down on the other side. He's got quite the extravagant mustache. Like, I'm not jealous. When my mustache gets even a little bit long, I cut it off because it grosses me out the way that food gets caught in it. I don't know how you would eat with a mustache like this, but he's got this arched eyebrow. This is actually a shadow. His eyebrows are white. So these dark lines are not the brows, they are the shadows under the brows, and then the brows are up above them, and we show that with a dotted line up above like that. And to show that he's going ho, 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 we got to make his mouth just a little bit open like this. And now that we've done all these details, it's time to zoom back out again and check our work from a little further away, which you at home, that means maybe taking a step back from your work. And we can see that we are on our way to being close to being done here. So we're not going to do all the details of this beard, but you will notice that the beard can be shadow matte. See this edge here? This is where the light ends on the beard, and we are allowed to shade things that are white if they fall into shadow. So we're going to shade along here. And we're going to shade along here. I'm going to do a little hint of his collar just so he doesn't look like he's a naked Santa. And look at his he's got kind of long hippie hair, doesn't he? He's a free spirit, Santa Claus is. Now, we already blocked in this hat. So now I'm going to look at the negative space created between the edge of the hat and the edge of the hair. So I'm looking at these shapes. Just do the best you can. Don't get too hung up on it. But don't think of like, how do I draw this hair? Just think, how do I copy these shapes? And you'll be fine. And see, these are all the shapes that the hair makes as it overlaps the hat. It's important to show that overlap. And he does have an ear. It's way down here. We can only see the bottom half of it, and it's in shadow. So there's the tragus and antitragus, and that's about all we can see. Now I'm going to go along the top edge of the hat and draw this jaggedy forms of this. It's a fur hat. And I guess the myth is consistent with the idea that you're probably going to get your best presents from a rich old man. So he's definitely represented as a rich old man with a fur hat. We can shade this pretty dark. And let these locks flow along behind him a little. Let these holly leaves on his hat, we can do that really quick. And you can add your own invented details to make your Santa more personal to you if you would like. And I'm going to come around in just a second and give you a hand finishing these. And the last thing, well, here's his little suggestion of his sack of toys, his shoulder. We're not going to do the pipe, but he does have these. Now, there's one thing to learn from this hair treatment that's relevant to the work you're doing in class, which is artists always used to train in drawing by copying plaster casts. And what that does for you, sculptors cannot obviously sculpt every single hair. So sculptors have to simplify hair and think of it in terms of clumps or masses of hair. And you can see that Thomas Nast does that very well here. He's thinking about, there are no individual hairs represented. There are just these big ribbon-like clumps of hair, and that's a very useful simplification to understand. And he is exhaling a little wisp of pipe smoke, so we can certainly include that detail. Notice I'm not attempting to copy the exact shapes of the wisps. I'm just sort of freehanding it. Even the mustache has these like very defined clumps of hair growing out of it. But it's kind of cool to realize that this image is sort of the origin of the look of the modern Santa Claus. It was very influential. Yeah, Thomas Nast. I think it was around 1870, but I could be wrong. I'll look it up after. And there's very strong contrasty lighting here. It's kind of interesting. Almost a little scary looking, the way he just went really hard on these shadows. I'm not going to try to bring it that far along, though. So. Okay, that's gonna do it for today's video. In class, you guys keep working for a little longer. I'm gonna come around and take a quick look. And happy holidays to all of you at home.